and welcome to In Depth. I'm Tina Jha. After India's success in having got Jaish-e-Mohammed chief Masood Azhar designated as a global terrorist in May this year, Pakistan is resorting to a tit-for-tat designation of Indian nationals as terrorists under the UN Security Council's 1267 Al-Qaeda Sanctions Committee. Reports suggest that India has informed the United States and its other allies in the UN Security Council about blatant attempts by Pakistan, of course with the help of China, to accuse Indian expats working in Afghanistan of terror crimes and then get them listed as global terrorists by the 1267 Sanctions Committee of the UN Security Council. In just the past 2 months, Pakistan, with China's help, has submitted proposals to designate 6 Indians as global terrorists. At the same time, it is also trying to get the terror list involving its own nationals and entities reduced by either getting them killed or neutralized in drone attacks. Defense experts say Pakistan's game is to malign India's image worldwide by getting Indians designated as global terrorists so that it can show to the world that when it comes to global terror, India is no different. On the show today, we'll try and understand in greater detail the game plan of Pakistan, along with its all-weather friend China, in maligning India's image. Besides, we'll also tell you all about the Sanctions Committee of the United Nations Security Council. So, backed by China, Pakistan is accusing 6 Indian nationals living in Afghanistan of terror crimes. Islamabad has approached the United Nations to designate these 6 Indian nationals as global terrorists. India has informed about these developments to the United States and its other friends in the UN Security Council about this blatant attempt by Pakistan to malign the country's image. Taking serious note of the ploy by Pakistan to accuse Indian expats working in Afghanistan of terror crimes, India on 27th November 2019 apprised the United States and others in the United Nations Security Council of Pakistan's conspiracy against it. Diplomats and officials in intelligence agencies have said that in the past 2 months, Pakistan, with the help of China, has submitted proposals to designate 6 Indians as global terrorists by the 1267 Sanctions Committee. The official said most recent additions are Raghavchari Parthasarathy and B. Sudhakar, both working as storekeepers for KEC International at Mazar-e-Sharif in Afghanistan. Fearing the worst, Parthasarathy has been brought back to India, but Sudhakar is yet to be traced. KEC International is involved in laying transmission lines. Both men belong to Telangana. While the United States has blocked 2 proposals supported by China, 4 more proposals about Indians are pending before the United Nations Security Council Sanctions Committee. The 2 blocked ones concern Venu Madhav Dongara and Ajoy Mistry. The 2 others pending before the committee relate to Appaji Angara and Gobind Patnaik Dugivalsa. Almost all of them have been accused of involvement in a terror attack in Peshawar. According to officials, both Angara and Dugivalsa are back in India.
There is actually no Indian hand, but the Pakistan government is getting very, very desperate. They want to show the world that no, there is an Indian hand also, which is why they have named these 4 individuals. Fortunately for India, we found out well in time and we got those people back from Afghanistan because we got to know that this plot is developing from their side. So these people who were part of the development activities, and all of them have been in this developmental field for many years. They are no agents and they are normal civilian people. But as far as Pakistan was concerned, they tried to create this image. And it is fortunate that we got those individuals out in time. But in any case, the world will not believe the Pakistani narrative.
Till date, the UNSC 1267 committee has listed 130 Pakistanis and 25 entities based in that country for their role in global terror. Following the May listing of Pakistan-based Jaish-e-Mohammed's Masood Azhar, despite Pakistan's best efforts to prevent it, the country has been desperately trying to get back at India. Expats working on reconstruction projects in war-ravaged Afghanistan are a soft target.
in Afghanistan, we had some Indians who were working there on construction projects. Now, these were normal people because India is carrying out a lot of work in Afghanistan to help the people of Afghanistan in building infrastructure. So even the parliament building of Afghanistan was built by India. So India is building roads, we have helped them in the construction of dams, we have helped them in the construction of hospitals and many other buildings. So these engineers of ours who were there, what Pakistan tried to do was to catch a few of them and then say that these were terrorists and they were actually carrying out terrorist attacks against Pakistan through Afghanistan. They even tried to say that the school which was bombed, where the school children were killed, 130 or 140 school children were killed in Pakistan by the Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan, they actually tried to pinpoint one of these Indians also to say that he had a hand in that murder. Now, Pakistan has been trying very, very desperately to get those names onto the 1267 list so that the world will say that India is also carrying out terrorist attacks.
Meanwhile, UN watchers say that separately, Pakistan is trying to get the terror lists involving its nationals and entities reduced by citing them as killed or neutralized in drone attacks or counter-insurgency operations. At the same time, it is targeting India to show that its neighbor is no different when it comes to global terror. Counter-terror operatives believe that this is a Pakistani inter-services intelligence ploy to weed out those who it believes are working for Indian security agencies in Afghanistan. According to Indian diplomats, the US and other allies in the UNSC are watching the latest Pakistani game unfold in the 1267 and are expected to call out Islamabad for this blatant mischief. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV. Well, Pakistan is facing intense global pressure for failing to take credible action against terror. Already struggling with an economic slowdown and also inflation, it now runs the risk of being blacklisted by the Financial Action Task Force for sponsoring terrorism. And therefore, it is against this backdrop that Islamabad is accusing Indian expats working in Afghanistan of terror crimes and trying to get them listed as global terrorists. In the last 2 months, Pakistan has tried to get 6 Indians designated by the United Nations as global terrorists. More significantly, it has the backing of China in these attempts. The moves by Pakistan and China's support for them come barely months after the US and France made Beijing agree to the designation of Jaish-e-Mohammed chief Masood Azhar as a terrorist by the UN 1267 committee on 1st of May this year. Consequently, Azhar is facing the freezing of his assets, a travel ban and an arms embargo by all UN member states. Since then, UN watchers say that Pakistan is following a two-pronged strategy. On the one hand, it is trying to get terror lists involving its nationals and entities reduced by stating that they have been killed in drone attacks or counter-insurgency operations. At the same time, by trying to mount false cases against Indians to get them designated as global terrorists. It is trying to show that India is no different when it comes to global terror.
Now, what Pakistan is trying to do is trying to equate India with Pakistan. What they're trying to say is that even India has got their terrorists. Now, this is not going to work because the whole world knows very well that this is everything which has happened in Pakistan, every single act of terrorism which has taken place in Pakistan was because of the internal problems of Pakistan, right? And not just that, they have admitted it themselves. Their leaders continuously stated that the Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan, which is based in Fatah on some parts of Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, they know very well that it is their organizations which are fighting against the state of Pakistan. So there is actually no Indian hand, but the Pakistan government is getting very, very desperate.
On Tuesday, speaking at a program in Mumbai to mark the 11th anniversary of the 26/11 Mumbai terror attacks, Defence Minister Rajnath Singh said Pakistan will get blacklisted by the Financial Action Task Force if it did not stop sponsoring terrorism.
हमने पिछले वर्षों में भारत में मौजूद हर तरह के टेरर इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर को डिसमेंटल करने में कामयाबी भी हासिल की है। अब अगला कदम टेररिज्म के फाइनेंशियल नेटवर्क को डिसरप्ट करने की दिशा में लिया जा रहा है और इस फाइनेंशियल नेटवर्क को हम डिसरप्ट करने में कामयाबी हासिल करेंगे, यह भी मैं आपको यकीन दिलाना चाहता हूं। फाइनेंशियल एक्शन टास्क फोर्स आज पाकिस्तान को ग्रे के सारे शेड्स नजर आने लगे हैं। यदि वह टेररिज्म को स्पॉन्सर करना बंद नहीं करेगा तो उसका ब्लैक लिस्टेड होना तय है। शायद महंगाई और मंदी के संकट से घिरे पाकिस्तान के लिए एफएटीएफ ने ब्लैक लिस्ट होना आतंकवाद के ताबूत में यह आखिरी कील साबित होगा।
Already struggling with an economic slowdown and inflation, being blacklisted by the FATF will be a huge setback for Pakistan. Clearly, Islamabad is not able to crack down on terror. As a result, Pakistan was placed on the grey list by the Paris-based Financial Action Task Force in June last year. Islamabad was given a plan of action to complete by October 2019 or face the risk of being placed on the blacklist with Iran and North Korea. When Pakistan once again failed to take adequate action against money laundering and terror financing, the FATF extended the country's continuation on the grey list till February next year. Further, on 1st November 2019, the US State Department released a report on terrorism. It states that Pakistani authorities failed to uniformly implement UN sanctions related to designated entities and individuals like the Lashkar-e-Taiba and its affiliates that continue to use economic resources and also raise funds. The report says Pakistan's implementation of international standards to combat money laundering and terror financing is uneven. Given its struggles to check funding on terror and its failure to do so, it will most certainly be blacklisted. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV. Time for a short break on the program, but when we return, we'll tell you about the 1267 Sanctions Committee of the United Nations Security Council. Do stay with us. Welcome back. You're watching In Depth. The Sanctions Committee was first established pursuant to Resolution 1267, which imposed a limited air embargo and assets freeze on the Taliban. Later, the regime evolved and the measures spread to other entities and individuals associated with these organizations, including the Al-Qaeda and the Islamic State, also known as ISIL. 130 Pakistani individuals and 25 groups from the country are currently included on the list, with 7 as working against India. Let's now understand how the committee has evolved over the years and the individuals and terrorist groups listed on it.
The Security Council Committee was initially established pursuant to Resolution 1267, which imposed sanctions that included a limited air embargo and assets freeze on the Taliban. With time, the measures became a targeted assets freeze, travel ban and arms embargo against designated individuals and entities. On June 17, 2011, the Security Council unanimously adopted Resolutions 1988 and 1989. The committee was split and one was known as the Al-Qaeda Sanctions Committee, with the mandate to oversee implementation of measures against individuals and entities associated with Al-Qaeda. A separate committee was established to pursue Resolution 1988 that would oversee implementation of the measures against individuals and entities associated with the Taliban. Then, on 17 December 2015, the Security Council unanimously adopted Resolution 2253. With that, it decided to expand the listing criteria to include individuals and entities supporting the Islamic State in Iraq and the Levant. Under these resolutions, the acts or activities indicating that an individual, group, undertaking or entity is associated with ISIL and Al-Qaeda include participating in the financing, planning, facilitating, preparing or perpetrating of acts or activities by, in conjunction with, under the name of, on behalf of or in support of, supplying, selling or transferring arms and related materials to, recruiting for or otherwise supporting acts or activities of ISIL, Al-Qaeda or any cell, affiliate, splinter group or derivative thereof. In all, there are 7 individuals and entities listed in the 1267 committee as working against India. They include Masood Azhar, who was listed on 1st May 2019, Mohammad Hafiz Saeed and Zakiur Rahman Lakhvi listed on 10th December 2008, and Dawood Ibrahim Kaskar listed on 3rd November 2003. The entities or groups on the list include Jaish-e-Mohammed listed on 17th October 2001, Harkatul Mujahideen listed on 6th October 2001 and Lashkar-e-Taiba listed on 2nd May 2005.
There have been 83 entities, a very large number of terrorist organizations which have already been named and which come under this particular sanctions. As far as the Indian ones are concerned, which are based in Pakistan, we have the Harkatul Mujahideen, we have the Jaish-e-Mohammed, we have the Lashkar-e-Taiba. The Pakistani organizations are also there. That is the Pakistan Taliban, the Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan is also placed there, and there are many other organizations. Most of these organizations are in Saudi Arabia, in West Asia, and in parts of Africa. Any individual also associated with them also comes under this list.
Masood Azhar is a Pakistani terrorist responsible for some of the worst attacks on India in recent years. He is the founder of Jaish-e-Mohammed, a terrorist group responsible for a number of major attacks on Indian soil, including the suicide bombing that killed dozens of Indian paramilitary personnel in February this year. Azhar's listing in the UN designated terrorists list in May this year was a huge diplomatic win for India, as it was done after several thwarted attempts. Hafiz Mohammad Saeed is a Pakistani Islamist terrorist, co-founder of the Lashkar-e-Taiba and the chief of the Jamaat-ud-Dawa, operating mainly from Pakistan. In April 2012, the United States announced a bounty of $10 million on Saeed for his alleged role in the 2008 Mumbai attacks that killed 164 civilians. India has been trying to bring Hafiz Saeed to justice in the country, but its efforts have failed so far because of Pakistan's inaction. Following a Lahore High Court ruling, Saeed is currently moving freely around the country. Zakiur Rahman Lakhvi is a Pakistani terrorist known as the top leader of the militant group Lashkar-e-Taiba. He currently serves as the Supreme Commander of Operations in Kashmir and as a member of the LAT's General Council. Lakhvi was also involved in the 2008 Mumbai terror attacks. He is listed on India's NIA Most Wanted list. Dawood Ibrahim Kaskar is a Mumbai underworld mobster and drug dealer who is a most wanted terrorist with a reward of $25 million over his head. He has been wanted by India since 1994 on charges of murder, extortion, targeted killing, drug trafficking, terrorism and various other cases. He was designated as a global terrorist by India and the US in 2003 for his role in the 1993 Mumbai bomb blasts. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV.
There are 14 sanctions committees under the UN Security Council. They are tasked with various responsibilities such as political settlement of conflicts, nuclear non-proliferation and counter-terrorism. Sanctions committees comprise of all 15 members of the Security Council, and each committee is chaired by a non-permanent member on a rotational basis. The ISIL or Islamic State and the Al-Qaeda Sanctions Committee, also known as the 1267 Sanctions Committee, oversees sanctions related to individuals, entities and groups associated with these terrorist organizations. In this report, let's try and understand the work and mandate of the 1267 Sanctions Committee.
In order to maintain or restore international peace and security, the United Nations Security Council is mandated to impose sanctions under Chapter 7 of the UN Charter. Sanctions under Article 41 cover many enforcement options that do not involve use of armed forces. Since 1966, the Security Council has imposed sanctions on 30 terror groups like ISIL, Daesh, Al-Qaeda and Taliban. The UNSC Resolution 1267, adopted on 15th October 1999, is a consolidated list of people and entities associated with Al-Qaeda or the Taliban. It states the laws that must be passed by each member nation to implement these sanctions. The committee comprises all 15 members of the Security Council. Decisions are made by consensus. Indonesia is the current chair of the 1267 Sanctions Committee till 31st December 2019. The two vice chairs for 2019 are Russia and Peru. The Sanctions Committee oversees implementation of the sanctions. It designates individuals and entities who meet the listing criteria, decides upon requests for exemptions or removal of names from the ISIL, Daesh and Al-Qaeda from the sanctions list, conducts periodic reviews of entries on the ISIL, Daesh and Al-Qaeda sanctions list, and also conducts outreach activities.
This is a committee formed under the UN Security Council. The complete Security Council, all the 15 members are part of this committee. Now, what happens is that this resolution 1267, it was passed. It was really called it was passed to place sanctions on any entity or individual associated with the Al-Qaeda, and it was formed in 1999. Now, when we come a few years later and we come down to 2011, the Al-Qaeda restrictions were actually expanded to the Taliban also. So any terrorist or entity or individual helping the Taliban came under the list.
The UNSC Sanctions Committee functions on the basis of adopted guidelines and sets forth criteria for listing and delisting associated individuals and entities. The criteria for adding a name to the ISIL, Daesh and Al-Qaeda sanctions list is set out in paragraphs 2 to 4 of Resolution 2368 adopted in the year 2017. States are required to impose measures upon Al-Qaeda or ISIL, Daesh and other individuals, groups, undertakings and entities associated with them. Acts or activities indicating that individuals or groups are associated with ISIL, Daesh and Al-Qaeda include participating in the financing, planning, facilitating, preparing or perpetrating of acts or activities by supplying, selling or transferring arms and related material to the terror group. Recruiting for or supporting acts or activities of ISIL, Daesh, Al-Qaeda or any cell, affiliate, splinter group or derivative thereof.
Three things which come into the sanction for any entity or for any individual. One is a ban on finances or any financial transaction. The second is a ban on travel, and third is an arms embargo. So now every country is duty bound to ensure that any individual or entity which is placed on this UN list, on the sanction list, which we generally call the 1267 sanction list for all these terrorists, those individuals, the country is duty bound to ensure that they do not transit their territory, that any financial transactions which are carried out will not be permitted, and no arms can be carried by any of these groups through the physical territory of that state.
There are 14 ongoing sanctions regimes that focus on supporting political settlement of conflicts, nuclear non-proliferation and counter-terrorism. Each regime is administered by a sanctions committee chaired by a non-permanent member of the UNSC on a rotational basis. Their work is guided by specific mandates which list out the functions they have to carry. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha team.
So that's it from us today in depth. We'll be back same time tomorrow with a focus on some other subject. You can also watch our program online on YouTube and Twitter. And of course, you can also drop in your suggestions and feedback about our program as well. Thank you for your time.